Today I want to talk about something that I like to do when I play clawhammer, which is when you hit an open string, often, well, with both your striking finger or your thumb, to let those open strings ring for as long as possible. When I first started playing clawhammer, I did find that was something I had to consciously manage in my playing, was that if I was hitting open strings, and then you hit a string next to it, it's very easy to mute the first string, the ringing string, just by being just a little bit inaccurate when you're striking the next string. So you go. So there I muted it. I didn't mute it entirely because the skin head is still resonating, but you don't get the full effect of letting it ring. You know, it's just nice. I just like to hear the notes ring out. Sometimes you don't. I almost always do, but sometimes you don't in certain situations. But that's not what we're talking about here today. Today we're talking about letting strings ring, or you can think of it more as getting out of the way of ringing strings. What I played at the start there was the B part of Soldier's Joy, at least the way that I play the B part of Soldier's Joy. And there's a lot of hitting, because the whole melody is really on this first string for most of it. But then when it does descend down, it's cool to descends down to open strings. It's cool to let those open strings keep ringing. So here, I'll try to play it slower. So there, that's your G string. Just try to let that ring. When you play it again, try to let that C string ring out. You can also hit the G and then immediately thumb to the low C and keep letting them ring. Here's another example on the A part of Green Willis. Try to pay attention to what I'm doing on the low C string. I'll be hitting it with my thumb and then trying to get out of the way and make sure I'm not inadvertently touching it with any other finger or my thumb or anything like that, to just let it ring for as long as possible. What's important about this technique is that when you're drop thumbing, you're not letting your thumb rest on the string. It's letting this top part of your thumb rest on the strings, if those strings are ringing. If they're not ringing, it doesn't really matter. Maybe that's a pretty good example there. See, there I just muted it inadvertently. I didn't actually mean to do that. But it is very easy, so what you have to really pay attention to is the angle that your thumb is coming in to do the drop thumb technique. I think the natural angle is more of this flat. Sometimes people take it to bend it like that. I don't do that myself, but it is kind of, you know, you're keeping the thumb on the strings, which is a technique in a lot of other string instrument playing, that you want to be muting strings as you move around in order to minimize the amount of overlapping resonance. But I think in clawhammer playing, that's certainly not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to let it make as much sound as possible, particularly, I should say, solo clawhammer playing, because I'm not responding to other chord changes. I'm not trying to dampen certain frequencies when I'm playing the melody. I just kind of want to let things rock. One exercise I like to use, and I did use a lot when I was really trying to dial in this technique, is that you can just do a descending drop thumb exercise where you go. an angled thumb where you're letting notes ring. If you don't, you can hear that dampening, especially of that low C string. Versus, they're both interesting effects. I think you want to be able to control the angle of your thumb so that you can get both of those. But for me, I'm certainly defaulting to a kind of higher angle rather than this, almost arching the wrist ever so slightly. Certainly not a lot, I'm exaggerating it here, but let's watch it again. If I play that B section of Soldier's Joy. So there, both the G and the C are ringing, and you do want to get that angled thumb when drop thumbing. What am I even talking about? I think that's really all I wanted to say, and that's my favorite exercise to work with on that drop thumb, descending drop thumb exercise. You can go ascending too. Essentially just be careful with the placement of your dropping thumb. And try to increase the speed of that exercise. You don't always have to do descending, you can just kind of do random, pick a string and hit it. And again, if you don't do that, if you don't angle your thumb in, you can get that very different sound. You know, as I do that, that does sound more clawhammer to me, I will admit. More of a conventional sound. And I think that's simply by virtue of how drop thumbing works. It simply is easy to rest the rest of your thumb on the strings. That just makes a lot of sense from a playing ease perspective. But if you can kind of hold your wrist out just ever so slightly and angle the tip of your thumb in there, that's a pretty cool sound to me, to let everything ring. I developed this technique, or didn't develop this technique, I started concentrating on it, particularly when playing Old Molly Hare, as I learned it from my father, which is something like that. I'm pretty bad at doing it that way these days. These days I play it mostly as with a lot of prominent dropping into that low C string. That's how my dad plays it, I should say. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. That's when I started developing the technique to not dampen that, because I just wanted to hear that low C ring out when you're playing it on every phrase in the B part of Old Molly Hare. And there it's not a drop at all, I'm striking it with my middle finger. But you can also hit it with your thumb. I guess hitting with your thumb, I should say, to me is a little bit more rhythmically interesting, because you're, I don't want to say subverting, but kind of subverting where you'd think a low note would go. Low notes, as played on bass instruments, are usually, right on the beat. So when you're hitting it with your thumb in the clawhammer pattern, it's always going to be on an E, an off beat, essentially is what I'm trying to say, off beat. So let's hear that again. On beat. or because to me, moving that low note onto the thumb kind of creates a sense of urgency, a sense of propulsion in the music, which is something I just love about clawhammer banjo, that you can do that it's available, that the style pushes you towards that. That's all very cool to me. Maybe I'll play Green Willis again. That's the one these days that I think about the most when I think about sustaining a drop thumb note, getting out of the way of a ringing string. That was kind of cool. I actually caught the ringing string with my nail on this finger, gave it a little bit of a buzz sound. So, you know, the mistakes are cool too. It's always cool to cultivate your mistakes. Should also note too, now that I'm just playing this music, if you are going for that big pop sound, that's pretty hard to not mute everything. So that's not something I'm trying to do. That sound, to really dig in, probably clipping the microphone there a little bit. That's kind of cool too, because in order to get that sound, you know, it's like the water rushing out before a big wave comes in. Everything goes quiet for a moment before you give it that huge pop. That's a pretty cool sound to me. So that's the opposite of what I'm trying to get across in this video, that you can and should let strings ring. You can also not, particularly in that case, because the technique is leading you there. To do a pop, you're getting all of your thumb laying on the strings, and you're killing all the ringing. That's cool too. Not sure where this is ending up, but as thoughts about clawhammer, ringing strings, non-ringing strings, my first time attempting a video like this, maybe that's enough. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.